This episode is brought to you by Sleep Number. Getting a quality night's sleep is a big game changer. It can help boost your reaction time, recovery time, and performance. So get the sleep you deserve with the Sleep Number Smart Bed. It was designed for your individual sleep needs with adjustable firmness and cooling layers. It even adapts to your movements so you can sleep comfortably all night long. Sleep next level with Sleep Number Smart Beds. Only at Sleep Number stores or sleepnumber.com.
At the Musial with Alan and Daniel, we'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. No Alan Medlock again this week. It's the baseball season starting to get started, but we will be recording. Alan and I have decided we're going to do a little 10 or 15 minute I wouldn't say podcast, segment, I guess is the best way of putting it, every week to talk about the Tulsa Hell Rangers. If you are interested, we'll put it at the end of the show probably, and that way, if you're not, you can skip it. So, but until then, until Alan gets back, we have wonderful guests, and that is no exception tonight as we have Dayn Perry joining us. You'll find Dayn at Dayn Perry on Twitter. You'll find him at CBS, and of course, he's got his Substack, Birdy Work. Dayn, how are you doing?
I'm good, Daniel. Good to be with you again, man.
That's good, very good. It's been just about a year since we've talked, I think.
Has it been that long?
Well, I think you started the Birdy Work right around the end of March last year?
Yeah, right before opening day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I
So
didn't
it's
know it
probably
had been
around
that
that
long.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's the last time we've talked this way. We've exchanged
Right.
messages enough
Yeah.
times, but I don't want to start out with the Substack and how that has gone over the last year. Has it met the expectations that you had for it going into it?
Yeah, it has really. I'm enjoying doing it, and it's we've got a nice little reader base of which you are one, and my gratitude for that. And yeah, it's been it's something I've wanted to do for a long time. It's really been a good outlet for me. It's something I enjoy quite a bit, and I've been a Cardinals fan since I was 7 years old or whatever. And this has long been something I wanted to do. I wanted to put my focus on the team and write about them, as guys like you have been doing for so long. And it's good to be part of the club.
Have you found it I'm sure it hasn't, but have you found it at all conflicting with your day job, as it were?
No, obviously my priority is going to be CBS, and if there's anything Cardinals related they want me to write about, I'm going to write about it, even if there's some redundancy there. And I'm able to compartmentalize and put on my objectivity hat when I need to for CBS, and I kind of tend to take a sensible remove anyway with the Cardinals, even when I'm writing about them as a fan. And so it's pretty easy for me to transition into that role on CBS, where I have to be the super serious observer hovering above everything, and detached and clinically removed from everything.
It's and we'll put the plug in here because it's $36. I think if you get a whole year subscription, you can do it a monthly fee as well. But it's definitely worth it because you've put out pretty much for every week this year. You've put out at least 2 posts, haven't you? I mean, it feels like every week you're generating out pretty in-depth content on a
I think
on a
it
regular
probably
basis.
averages 2 a week. There's probably been a week or two in the off season where it's just been 1 a week, but I'll never go fewer than 1 a week. So, but it'll probably average out at 2 a week, particularly during the season. So, yeah.
I'm writing over there too. Have you found it? I don't know. For me, the Substack site, I guess, or the platform, or however, I find it a little bit easier to write there for whatever reason. I know you've got a number of places that you've written at. Is that the
Mhm.
same for you, or is it just, kind of doesn't really matter too much?
Yeah, I could agree with that. Yeah. Uh, the interface is really simple, and there's autonomy to it, obviously, because you're doing this for yourself and not, doing it for the boss or and that sort of
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there is that sense of agency about it, and I really, appreciate that. And they make everything pretty simple on the back end. And I also like the way visually it comes across in your email box.
Hmm.
Like when I get yours or that kind of thing, it's always an attractive looking newsletter. It looks professional and well formatted and everything like that. So I've enjoyed my relatively brief time there so far.
Yeah, I like to look professional until they start reading it, and then they realize it's not. So it's okay. It tricks them
I,
into it for a little bit.
I don't know about that,
Um,
man.
um, you have, of course, a wide audience, but you know that there are people in the Cardinal front office that are reading this as well.
Yeah.
Does that, because you have linked to me a couple times, I know there's a couple that have followed me as well, and so I
Hmm.
sometimes have that in my head of, not that I'm going to go bashing people or not
Right.
anyway,
Right.
but it's still kind of, it's like, are they just going to laugh at this when they get it? That kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I that's an interesting point. Maybe that's in my head now, but no, I had not. I had not previously thought of it that way. Uh, I usually, when I was younger, I used to write a bit more provocatively, if you will.
Mhm.
But that just kind of got tiresome for me, and I'm not really looking for unnecessary confrontation at this stage of my
Mhm.
life.
Right.
So I've moderated that a bit, and I do try to see every side to an issue, and I do generally go by the principle that everyone has reasons for the way they
Mhm.
behave or the decisions they make. They may not be great reasons, but they are reasons. And so I try to let that bleed over into my analysis of the Cardinals. Yeah, but I am aware that they have front office eyeballs on it and that sort of thing. But I guess I'm more worried about catering to the average reader than I am,
Mhm.
someone in the front office and that kind of thing. So, but now that you mention that, maybe I'll start thinking about that.
Well, but you've also had, being that you've been at bigger platforms like CBS, you know that there are industry insiders reading that stuff just because of the broadness of it. So maybe that influences you as well, as you don't have to worry about it because you've been doing it forever.
Yeah, I one time a former GM got my phone number and was
Mm.
outraged and called me and was basically quote unquote, just if you think I'm an idiot, just say so. And and we ended up taking it in a civil direction. But yeah,
Mhm.
so that is a dynamic I'm familiar with, and every now and then you get not necessarily a GM, that's kind of a rarity, but you do get, say, a spokesperson for the team reaching out and saying, I'm not sure you were entirely fair, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's probably somewhere in the back of my head there, even though I don't
Yeah.
consciously think of it.
Well, and like you said, I mean, you're not taking, like I said, for me, it's like, like this off season when you're writing articles about, and you did too, about, they need to go out and get Yamamoto, and we kind of lay out the reasons for that. And you just,
Hmm.
you start thinking, after like I've sent it out, that I'm like, are they just thinking, well, if you just knew this and this and this, you wouldn't
Right,
write that, that kind of thing. But, they also don't tell us this and this and this. So
right,
what can we do?
right. And I try to take the stance that if it's anything spending related, it's probably the fault of ownership. It's
Hmm.
not like they have all this spending latitude in baseball ops and they're just saying, we don't feel like using it. We'll just go with this. So I do try to make that distinction instead of blaming Mozeliak for everything, which kind of seems to be some strains of the fan base do that. So I try to be fair. And but yeah, I mean, we have limited information, on the public side of things. So we can only work with what we know and what's disclosed to us from the team and what's reported and that kind of thing. And so if there's key pieces of that missing, then that's really kind of on the team for not disclosing it.
Before we get into like the postseason and all the stuff the Cardinals have done and all this kind of stuff, I do want to mention, along with the Substack, as part of that, you've got a Slack that people can be involved in as well. And I know you've been especially really active in that. I think it's very easy for someone to, set it up and let people talk and just kind of let it go. But you've been very active in that. Has that been exciting for you
Yeah.
as we've gone through this?
Yeah, I enjoy that. It's a Slack that it's, for paid subscribers, you get access to it if you want to, and it's for Cardinals discussions but not necessarily limited to that. There's, the only rule is, be civil to each other, and the discussions go where they may. And I enjoy interacting with Cardinals fans, and there's some really smart ones in there, including yourself. And it's I learned some things, and it's a good way to bounce off takes and that sort of thing. And in some ways, it probably informs the newsletter content directly and that kind of thing. But I would consider it a pretty heady place to discuss the Cardinals. So, paid subscribers, that's part of your benefits package, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I don't be able to. I'm not checking it all the time, but because if you don't check it all the time, there's tons of messages, but
Yeah,
it's always. I don't think there's ever been any kind of, it's always been smart and intelligent and civil discussion. It's
right,
never had any
right.
kind of flare ups,
Yeah.
which you can't say about the internet very often. So
Yeah, the older I get, the more I limit myself to certain corners of the internet and that kind of thing. So this is one of those corners that makes my life better and not worse, unlike a lot of
very
parts
true.
of the internet.
So you start this, right around opening day last year.
Hmm.
The Cardinals then go on to have their worst season in 30 years. So how much blame are you taking for this?
I'm that has occurred to me many times. It's like, oh my gosh, this is when I picked the time to do it, and how many potential subscribers did that cost me, and that kind of thing. So, uh, yeah, and yeah, I have a buddy who runs a Yankees Patreon. I don't even know how to say that. Patreon.
Yeah,
But and just it's the Yankees, and he's had a loyal following before that, so it's much larger than what I'm doing.
right.
And like the swings in subscribers based on how frustrating the team is being is really acute. And I probably got a little taste of that Cardinals version, not Yankees version, during this
Yeah.
past season. I mean, I was skeptical heading into the season because of the rotation. I think everybody recognized that was going to be a potential issue, but never did I imagine them losing that many games. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we thought it was going to be a problem and it might keep them out of first,
Right.
or it might, they might. I don't know that anybody went into last season, even with that, thinking this is not a 500 team, much
Right.
less what it turned out to be.
Right. Right. Yeah. So that's
Um,
yeah, but hopefully that is the low point for a long time.
I would say, and if nothing else, it gave you different things to write
It
about.
really did. I mean, there was, 5 days in, you've got Marmol calling out Tyler O'Neill, and it just kind of, it was the content river did not stop, did not dry up, but it's not necessarily the kinds of content you want. But
No,
I'll take what I can
no.
get, I guess.
That's right. You got to,
Yeah,
make lemonade out of lemons, that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we've had this winter, and again, a lot of us we spend October saying we think the Cardinals should do this and this and this, and then now here we are, basically a few days from spring training. We can kind of really look at what they actually did. When you take what they did compared to what we felt like they should do, how would you rate this winter?
I give it a B minus. I think, and a lot of this goes back to how I tend to put the blame on ownership for how much there is to spend and that sort of thing. And I
Mhm.
think they may have been working with tighter constraints than many of us thought they were coming into the offseason. And I know that was the case for me.
Yeah.
I felt like I was led to believe that spending would be higher than it has been.
Mhm.
With those constraints in mind, I think the front office did a pretty good job, you know, with their limitations. And yeah, I wanted not Sonny Gray and a couple of 4.5 starters. I wanted
Right.
Sonny Gray and another front line guy, and then a depth piece. We didn't get that, so that kept them from the A marks, if you will. But the rotation is going to be measurably better, and if the offense finds their level, which I feel like they will, that's going to be a roster capable of winning the National League Central. That is kind of damning with faint praise because I don't think the NL Central is going to be that strong. I think they did some interesting things with the bullpen, again, given the constraints that seem to be in place. So, yeah, I come in a B minus, and I could have probably talked them to just a straight up B. So it's, I'm not going to give them an increase in their allowance, but I'm also not going to ground them. So it's a B minus.
Ben Clemens and I talked a little bit about the fact this winter has been a lot of 1-year contracts, except for Sonny Gray, who's that 3-year deal, oddly backloaded for the fact that everything else is a 1-year deal. How much of that is the RSN situation, which I definitely want to talk about because you've written a lot of good stuff about it, and how much of it is John Mozeliak is getting ready to move on, and they want to kind of have a clear deck for whoever comes next?
It's got to be a mix, I would say. I mean, there definitely is RSN uncertainty beyond 2024. That's probably playing a role. I don't read too much into the Gray structuring. I just think when teams can backload and tap into the future value of money and that sort of thing, they'll do it. And but yeah, getting these sort of veteran guys who are willing to take that 1 year plus an option like Gibson and Lynn were, I think is a little south of what we were hoping for. But I see the vision, if you will. I mean, I think a lot of it is we underestimate just how terrible that rotation was, particularly once they had to start plugging holes last season. So the baseline is lower than you think it is for most people. And, but does this suggest anything about a future Mozeliak timeline? I don't know. That's possible. I think it's possible that he wants to have as clean a slate as possible for his replacement, which figures to be internal. And if 2024 goes awry, it would not surprise me to see Mozeliak hasten that timetable.
How much do you read into Chaim Bloom joining this organization? I mean, it feels like it's a good move in general because they have needed an outside voice. But does he immediately jump to the head of the line of people that can take that job when Mo's ready?
I don't know if it put him at the head of the line. I definitely think it makes him a candidate. I mean, Mozeliak basically said as much that, now we have a deeper bench when it comes to, potential successors for me. And I tend to think Bloom was brought on chiefly because he has experience in building out pitching infrastructure and as his Rays pedigree and that kind of thing. There are probably other motives beyond that, and I think replacing Mozeliak might be one of them. I think he is definitely in the mix. I mean, owners love to tap into the Rays incubator because they think they can get similar results but do it cheaper, and that's every owner likes to do that. So maybe that's in there. His Boston tenure was certainly a mixed bag, but he did do what he was told and cut payroll and rebuild the farm system. So I do think it makes him. Would I call him front runner? I don't know. I guess I would call it a toss up at this point. Gersh as well, and then maybe Flores, and who knows. But I do think they'll look internally, and now that Chaim Bloom is a consultant, he is an internal candidate. So yeah, I think it's a very realistic possibility.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine the Cardinals making a major hire outside the organization.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, and I guess bringing in a consultant like this who may be on the job for just 1 or 2 years before getting the president of baseball operations job to succeed Mozeliak, maybe that's as close to an external candidate as you'll get. Not exactly long in the tooth with the Cardinals, but has been there a little bit.
Right. Yeah, because they do have that need for their corporate culture to at least influence everything, whether it's the whole thing or not. So
and probably gotten a little insular in recent years, and having that outside perspective is very welcome.
I every time this stuff comes up, I remember I wrote an article. I think it was in 21 that with that title, are the Cardinals too insular? Because
Oh,
everybody, it was, even when you got into the TV and radio side of things, when Shannon left, they just brought in,
mhm.
Ricky Horton, and
Yeah,
when Dan left, it was, Chip Carey, which was outside the organization, but not really, I mean,
right,
so they,
right.
even going into that part of things, they just didn't ever want to embrace something that was not at least Cardinal red tinged.
Yeah, they love to play the hits. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I will say, as we talk about the Cardinals and them continually kind of doing what they always do, they kind of stepped away from their playbook this winter in building that bullpen. They did a lot of interesting things and a lot of different avenues as well. They didn't go out spending big money in the except for Keenan and Middleton there at the very end,
Mhm.
which is good because we've seen what John Mozeliak does with big money contracts to the
Right,
relievers.
right.
But I was very interested. I don't think I would have expected them to kind of go out and cobble together a bullpen like that.
I thought it was very interesting too, and it's honestly not the path I expected them to take. I thought Hicks would be back. I thought there'd probably be another notable free agent addition. I thought we might see one of their, higher level minor league starter arms be moved into a bullpen role, which of course could still happen. But I like what they've done. They've thrown a lot of strikeouts and a lot of velocity at the problem, and they're going to let God sort out the roles. They have a number of guys with options. There's good roster flexibility in there, uh, and I think that's a sensible way to build a bullpen. You can, as we know, you can really eat it when you sign
Mm-hmm.
non-elite relievers to free agent contracts. And the free agent contract they did sign to major league deal, Middleton, certainly a calculated risk, and even if it goes disastrously, it's $6 million guarantee. And I really like some of the arms that Riley O'Brien. I probably higher on him than I should be, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him in spring. And there's just some interesting guys out there. They have velocity and strikeouts now, and that's, they badly needed that in the rotation. Didn't particularly get it, but they added it to the bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's an interesting allotment of guys.
Yeah, it really it is, and then you've got guys like what Josh James, who's not even
Hmm.
on the 40 man. He's going to
Hmm.
be, unless he has a
Yeah.
great spring, going to be in your minor leagues, and a guy that has had a lot of success before. So I do like the fact that that at least in relievers, they didn't go out and get the 5 guys they needed. They went out and got 10,
Yeah.
and they don't
Yeah.
do that with starters.
Right. Right.
It's like,
Right.
okay, we got 5 people. We can't put any more
Yeah.
starters on this team. But with the bullpen, they did that, and I do think now there's probably 2 spots or so that's going to have a decent churn
Yeah.
of people going back and forth to Memphis.
Yeah. Yeah, the last CBA put in some limitations on how you use
Hmm.
options and that kind of thing. So it's not going to be, up one day down the next, but you can still have a conga line going, through the bullpen there. And I think that's going to serve them well because, you need to find out what works and you need to adjust if it's not working. You don't really have time to, it's analytically there's no such thing as an ideal bullpen because you just don't know what's going to happen over the short run. So at least they have options.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we know also that, everybody's going to show up on February 14th, and probably by March 14th, somebody's going to be hurt.
Right.
And you're not going to get into the season. We just hope that it's not anybody of significance.
Right.
And I say that wrong, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Because if
Right.
Sonny Gray gets hurt, we're in trouble, right? I mean, we're kind
Right.
of back to where we were
Right.
last year.
Right. Right. Yeah. Miles Michaelis, opening day starter. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and I know you and I both had the same idea. The Cardinals need to go get like at least 2 and maybe 3 guys better than Miles Michaelis, and then
Right.
you're a heartbeat away from him being your opening day
Right.
starter type of thing.
Right.
So
Right.
that is a scary thing. So um, you're right that they did raise the floor in the rotation. How much are you? I don't want to say banking, but maybe expecting. The fact that Lance Lynn isn't going to give up 44 home runs, the fact that, Kyle Gibson is going to be in a place that's a bit more of a pitcher's park. Do you have hope that these guys are going to be at least somewhat better than they were last year?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I would probably peg them for, worse than league average ERAs, but I think you will see improvement in terms of runs allowed. I don't think Lynn's stuff has degraded so much that he's just a
Mhm.
batting practice machine now. So I do expect positive regression on the home run front. Gibson, as you mentioned, Bush, he probably fit well there. Obviously, not facing some of those AL East lineups, and instead,
Mhm.
facing some NL Central lineups will probably help him a bit. And so, yeah, I think those guys are, you know, fourth and fifth guys. Let's say Matz, when healthy, can pitch like a three. And I think he
Yeah.
can. But obviously, that when healthy is the big qualifier there because you just
Mhm.
can't bank on him for durability. But at the back end, those are reasonable guys. But they have to they have to meet those expectations in that some improvement, particularly for Lynn, uh, is part of the bargain. That has to happen. Otherwise, he's not an adequate member of a rotation on a contending team.
Yeah. And Lynn did pitch pretty well with the Dodgers. I
Yeah,
think he had a
he
couple
did.
of blowups that kind of skewed things, but for the most part, he pitched pretty well there. So if he can bring that to St. Louis, then I mean, I've got to feel like we've heard a lot of this winter, and we hear a lot of things in the winter that don't necessarily translate. But he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder probably
Yeah.
from last year, and he wants to make a good impression back in St. Louis. So we'll see how much that goes with the fact that he's into his mid to late 30s and it's a different type of pitcher.
I mean, if you've reached this level, you're not. You got weeded out a long time ago if you're not credited. If you're not competitive
Mm-hmm.
and don't take pride in your craft and want to go out there and prove people wrong. So, yeah, I think there's
Yeah,
something to that for sure.
yeah. So let's maybe we'll come back to that, but let's talk about the lineup. Like you said, you expect the little lineup to be a little bit stronger than it was last year. You've got Jordan Walker with a year under his belt and improving in the outfield, so hopefully that's less of a storyline as well.
Hmm.
They did not trade any of their young guys that I kind of thought they'd have to get the pitching in that they didn't get in, so maybe
That's
that's
what I
why. But
thought was going to happen. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so put all that together. I mean, you lost O'Neill, which you knew, and you lose Palacios, which okay, but it still looks like a team that is a really good team and still a team that has a little bit of redundancies here and there that they're going to have to try to figure out how to get everybody on the field.
Yeah, I have a lot of confidence in the offense in general terms because they got a bit unlucky last year. They were better than their run scored total.
Yeah.
I think their OPS as a team was probably in the top, I don't know, quarter of the league, and then uh, their run scored was not below average. So that'll probably even out this season, and they'll enjoy some the dead cat bounce, if you will, and get better in that regard. But I still worry about, as you mentioned, those lineup redundancies and potential bottlenecks and that kind of thing, because young to youngish hitters just need consistent reps. And, you know, and I don't, there's not a path to playing time, regular playing time anyway for Dylan Carlson. So I've kind of given up on that. But,
Mhm.
I just hope there's not overreaction to say, Mason Wynn gets a hit a week for the first month or something, and does bouncing Nolan Gorman between DH and second base or what have you mess with him somehow? And are we too aggressive with resting him with that with those back concerns, that kind of thing? Is Ivan Herrera going to get enough regular reps to find his level? How much playing time is Matt Carpenter going to take from Alec Burleson, who I still think has some potential? There's a lot of questions like that. Brendan Donovan, is he DH? Is he how much is he going to see in the outfield corners? Is he going to be the second baseman primarily? I know he's accustomed to bouncing around like that, as much as you can be across his brief career. But coming off Tommy John surgery, he's another guy who probably needs reps at the plate. So
Mhm.
I do have concerns, like you mentioned, about redundancy and just not getting the guys who need it regular run because of all this the crowded roster. That's a concern of mine.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, of course, I'm huge on Mason Wynn. I just am really excited about what he
Yeah.
brings to the team, but I do think back to when Colton Wong came up, and Colton struggled, and of course playing the great defense at second base, but he struggled offensively,
Hmm.
and it was less that he struggled and the fact that everybody else was kind of struggling that, he wound up getting sent to Memphis and we saw Mark Ellis play and weird things like that. And granted, Mike Matheny's not here anymore, so hopefully that's not an issue, but it does feel
Right.
like, sometimes that's out of their control, right? They may struggle, but if the rest of the lineup's going well, you don't worry about it. If it's not, then you start thinking, okay, well, Tommy Edmonds going to come in here and play this and we'll send Mason back to Memphis for a while.
How happy would we be if Mason Wynn got a walk-off caught stealing in the World Series this year?
I mean, yeah, I guess there's that. Maybe less him, but
Right. Well, you know what I mean. Yeah. Just
yeah,
the
yeah,
fact that he. Yeah. So
if
yeah.
it was
Let's
there.
let's hope the Colton Wong trajectory sticks there. Yeah. But yeah. I do. This is what, and I think this was kind of the. This is why I cut Marmol a bit of slack for last year. I think he was handed a really complicated roster that was just
Yeah.
hard to mix, hard to make everybody, hard to make it work, hard to get everybody the reps they need, the plate appearances they needed. It's better. O'Neill is gone, that kind of thing this season, but there's still some complications there, and I still think it's going to be a challenge for him.
And it felt like, to some degree, and I don't want to completely defend Marmol because he obviously had his issues as well last
Right.
year. But he was also coming, we say that, but then he was, coming off a year where he took the team to a 90 wins and a playoff role in his first year. So, how much is that? But anyway,
Yeah.
it did feel like there were times last year where I can remember at least one or two games where he made the right move. He made the right call to the bullpen and it just blew up on him.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
So it was just
Mhm.
that kind of year.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, you know, post facto hand rigging when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
managers and decisions they make. And, oh, that was so obviously a stupid decision. Well, no, it probably wasn't. It just, and that's baseball. It's just,
Yep.
it's such a unique game in that regard, and that you can make these proper decisions. And it's so randomness and luck driven at times that it's just go well. And, but nonetheless, blame is going to accrue to the decision makers, even if it's just driven by luck. So, that is the blessing and the curse of baseball.
Yeah, I think of the Van Hickelstein gif where it's the four quadrants, good process, bad result, bad process, bad result, that kind of thing,
Right,
and then you just
right,
don't know when
right.
you just hope that the good process is there and you just hope that the results over time go
Yeah,
with that process.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, and I mean, I do think it's an interesting year for Marmol too, right? I mean,
Yeah, contracts up.
no
Yeah, yeah,
contracts up,
yeah.
and as much as he can say he's excited about it, Yadier Molina is
Right.
lingering over him, and that adds to that degree of difficulty for this year.
Yeah, it's an incredibly awkward situation, and I think that you know I don't know. Do you see? Is it going to be something like the Yankees make a deep playoff run and Cashman fires Girardi because he wants someone else in there,
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. It's like, is it possible that the Cardinals meet expectations in 2024, even exceed them, and Marmol is not their manager next year? I mean, the Mike Schultz example is right there. I don't know. There certainly isn't that tension between Marmol and the front office that there was between Schultz and the front office, but Molina's right there, and as you note, he is a dominating presence,
Mhm.
even if he's not in the dugout. So it's interesting is probably the euphemism for it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you can even go farther beyond our times, and it's amazing to be able to say that. I know for some people, but you go back to Johnny Keane after the
Yeah,
'64 World Series, right? I mean, he's of course that was him up and leaving versus, but
yeah,
because the club was looking to fire him until things turned around. But yeah, I mean, you don't know. I mean, and I am of the opinion, and you tell me what you think too. The club, I would like to think the club is smarter than to try to hire Yadier Molina because managers are
yeah,
hired to be fired, and that's not going to go well.
yeah. Right, right. Yeah, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of, shall we say, cultural pressure for that to happen.
Mm,
For
yeah.
them to give that job. He would be beloved. He would be, he would rally the fan base, but I don't know how well it would go. And,
Yeah.
obviously everything depends on managers probably don't make a huge difference at the end of the day. Handful of games maybe between the best and the average manager. I don't know. I'm kind of
Mhm.
spitballing here, but
Yeah.
it'll depend on the trajectory of the organization in terms of talent at the highest level. But it's such an elephant in the room right now, and it's only going to get to be more of a undercurrent as
Mhm.
2024 plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think that it's there now. It's also fair to ask if Yachty is. I mean, he says he's ready to do 162 games. I think it's still fair to ask to see if he really is ready to commit to that.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's there, and I think it will be fascinating to see what the club does with that. I think it would be better for Yachty. I think it'd be better for everybody. I mean, you think about, Albert was here and hitting what, 200 until he had that in the first half
yeah,
of 21, and people, I don't think they were like, the Boo Birds weren't out, but
right,
there was some unrest of why are we still playing him and all that kind of stuff.
right, right.
Um, so and there's been a little bit of that with Yachty too, blocking some of those catchers. So yeah, if he gets into that position and then, they miss the playoffs for 2 years, it's like,
Yeah,
what have you done for me lately? So
yeah, yeah.
um, I think that's an interesting. Again, it's a wrinkle and it's a drama that, again, this is not well, I say it used to be an organization that it didn't really engage in drama, but maybe over the last few years that's kind of gone by the wayside.
Yeah, there's been some drama. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and it could be a decision that's taken out of Mozeliak's hands or his successor's
Sure.
hands, and the DeWitts say we're going to make Yadier Molina the manager. So
Hmm.
playing the
Yeah.
hits. Yeah, yeah,
It would fit
yeah,
the MO. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
when you look at
yeah,
especially when you look at the last three managers that
yeah.
that goes with it as well. So I don't know. I think that is going to be. I mean, so many things that overshadow because yeah, usually you kind of think about the bench coach being that maybe next in line, but you know, and if
Hmm.
Skip Schumacher was here, I think you would say that obviously because he went on to but
Right.
I don't think anybody really expects Daniel Del Scalzo because this is like, isn't this is his first coaching job, right? To
Yeah.
then step into
Hmm.
the manager's role.
Right. Right. Maybe Matt Holliday will be the manager.
Which again, yeah, I mean, once Matt gets his next
Yeah.
son drafted and
Right.
making millions of dollars, then
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
so. But then and you run into the same issue. I don't know. I think it would be fascinating to see Yadier Molina manage somebody, some other team, and just see how that went. But
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
likely it's gonna be here. So. So is there? I mean, we've talked a little bit about Mason Wynn, but is there a guy on this offense that you are really interested to see what happens with this year?
I mean, obviously Jordan Walker.
Mhm.
We're all captivated by him. Age 22 season coming up, so just obscenely young to have done what he did last season, and just he's just go out there and become my favorite player by by putting up the kind of numbers that I think you can put up. And so I'm last season it was stop what I'm doing and stare at his plate appearances, even when they were 20 games out or whatever.
Right.
So it already has that kind of appointment viewing feel to it because I mean, obviously the Cardinals have had a rich farm system in recent years, but yeah, it's been a while since Oscar Taveras, since the
Mm,
kind of ballyhoo that comes with being uh, a hitter to dream on comes along.
right.
And so I'm really looking forward to watching him. If you confine me to a non Jordan Walker answer, I got to say Gorman. Just what he's done in terms of power outputs when healthy at the highest level at a very young age is puts him in historically rare company. And I worry about the back. I've read some, John Denton reporting that it goes back to a 2020 weightlifting injury, which if that's still bothering him, that certainly raises some concerns. Um, but he's a 40 homer dude if he can stay healthy. I don't necessarily mean that in 2024, but very soon. And that's just how hard he hits the ball. Just top of the scale batted ball metrics and the home run power at such a young age, and a guy who can get by at an up the middle position, middle infield position. Just so intriguing. I just really hope that back holds up.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I know you wrote an article early on in the winter about not trading Nolan
Yeah.
Gorman, and that really kind of changed my mind because I had it in my head that maybe you do sell high on him because of the back issues and the
Mhm.
fact that he was one of the few people that could bring you back the Dylan Cease or whatever that you
Right.
thought that that you could get, which obviously that was not what they wanted to do.
Mhm.
But yeah, to have that kind of guy in the lineup is huge for this team, and it as they develop, it feels like they're pretty good. They're going to be able to transition from the Goldschmidt Arenado carrying the load to Gorman
Mhm.
Walker, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, they got some interesting young hitters, and yeah, and Herrera as well. I
Mhm.
based on the progress he made as a hitter last season, he's still just 23. He feels like he's been a prospect for a decade, but he's still young. And you have to wonder if, given the Sturm und Drang around Wilson Contreras' defense last season, whether Herrera starts nudging him into a DH, first base, maybe even an outfield corner, occasional duty out there for Contreras, and if Herrera makes the most of what figures to be limited playing time this season. So he's another one I'm interested in watching.
Yeah, I mean he really kind of has to, right? I mean, we've seen what he's done in
Yeah,
the Caribbean series or
yeah,
yeah, that he basically, I think he was named MVP of that because of what he's done, and he can't play. I mean, that was one of the arguments I had for keeping Andrew Kisner and letting Herrera play at AAA if you
yeah,
had to, because Kisner was fine playing 1 or 2 days a week. But I don't think you can do that with a guy like Herrera who needs to be learning the major leagues. But then you've got your
yeah.
biggest free agent in history sitting right in front of him, and I mean, again, that's another thing for Marmol to kind of deal with. That's a wrinkle that is not fun.
Yeah, and it also, the Contreras thing kind of says to me that they had no idea this was coming from Herrera
Hmm.
last season. That
Hmm.
that huge step forward. Because if you did know this was coming, then you probably don't sign Wilson Contreras.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm interested to see how Momo juggles that, and I'm also interested to see how Herrera produces with what figures to be inconsistent playing time.
You've got Walker, you've got Wynn. By the end of the year or next year, odds are you have Victor Scott the second. Is this going
Mhm.
to be the most personality a team has had in like 30 years, maybe since Ozzy and them?
I thought about this because it's particularly when Mason Wynn arrived, because
Mhm.
he's so twitchy out there in the field, and so he's like he almost looks like he's a punt returner on pop ups and stuff. I mean, he's just all over the place, and he's a fascinating player to me, and I'm really looking forward to watching him play defense. And
Yeah.
I guess that's one upside of not addressing the strikeout problem in the rotation. But yeah, and I think you're right in that you throw all these guys, these young guys arriving in there, particularly Scott, who's just going to have a skill set like we haven't seen since the 80s, as you
Yep.
mentioned. And I'm really excited about getting that core together and seeing what they can do.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And then, like you said, you probably have Gorman supplementing with power. The future, at least in that regard, is bright. The Cardinals still need to develop pitching, and I guess some of this
Mhm.
1 year with an option gives them a chance to see what they've got in Roby and some of the others that they brought in, or maybe draft
Yeah.
somebody and get that process started. But um, I mean, that's what they've got to do, right? I mean, either that or they're going to have to start spending money on pitching, which they really don't want to do either.
Right.
Which means as we transition, let's talk a little bit about the finances, because that comes a lot from the TV. You've written about the RSN. We've talked about, we've got Amazon that's kind of sweeping in and putting some wrinkles in this. The commissioner comes out, I think it was today, saying that he was hoping to have a streaming product by 2025 for about half the teams. Where do you think we stand right now, and where do you think we will stand this time next year?
Right now, everything hinges on court approval of this Amazon effort, because I think if that happens, then Diamond, which is the company that runs Bally's, becomes viable, at least able to survive for the near term into midterm. And we're probably not going to see major changes right away if they are able to get back to viability and be a going concern and that kind of thing. I'm inclined to say that's what happens, and that we get status quo for beyond 2024. We're going to have, as we know, the Cardinals have been guaranteed full payment for 2024. Beyond that is where the uncertainty is. Some reporting I've read, the judge of the bankruptcy court sounds pleased and happy lately in some of his quotes. So that leads me to believe. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm kind of talking out of my rear end here to an extent, but that leads me to believe that this is going in a desired direction, and that he is going to approve the Amazon buy-in and some of the other creditors, Diamond, and they're going to remain viable. And in a sense, as long as we're not talking about blackouts, that's good news, because the Cardinals will continue, making what they were slated to make. It's runs through 2032, their agreement, and it's somewhat backloaded, so the highest paying years are yet to come. So having that remain in force is not a bad thing. And if things go awry, if either the bankruptcy court does not approve this effort by Amazon, or it's still not enough for Diamond to remain viable, then the Cardinals are going to be in a pretty good position relative to a lot of other teams. They are not one of the clubs that sold full digital rights to Diamond, and that's what Amazon is angling to get, is those 5 clubs that ceded every hint of rights to Bally's and to Diamond. And the Cardinals do not do that. They can claw back their digital rights if their contract is not fulfilled, which is what would happen if Diamond is no longer viable. And they would get to, in essence, be a free agent. And, they have that 30% stake in Bally Sports Midwest, and that's, gives them additional power as well. So, and, considering they have strong local ratings, some of the strongest in the league, even in this down season, and considering they have a far-flung fan base, you're probably talking about a team that's going to do pretty well when it comes to direct consumer subscriptions and that sort of thing. Now, the league as a whole will take a hit, temporarily at least, under such a scenario. But the Cardinals, I think, would not be hit as hard as many other teams would be. So if you grade it on that scale, they're going to be hurting, but not as bad as most of the other teams. They're positioned to do okay, I think, regardless of how this plays out. I think that's probably the bottom line, because this stuff is all boring, but it's kind of stuff we have to talk about because it affects their spending, the business outlook, and ultimately the player payroll and all that. So I'm optimistic that the Cardinals are going to be fine, regardless of whether we get status quo or whether Diamond falls apart and it's a mad scramble.
And I mean, again, you're right. The Cardinals could reach out. I mean, Iowa, the places that don't get. I mean, I didn't watch any last year because I had to cut out DirecTV, and so being able to. But then I'm still in that blackout market, so I can't watch it on MLB TV. So, even just freeing up blackouts is a huge thing. And so when you said that, I was starting to wonder, because we hear the reporting about the Tigers and others that the rights that Diamond has, the Cardinals are not in that. I was kind of starting
Right.
to think, could they do something with those rights along with the contract? But it sounds to me like as long as the contract's voided or valid, that Bally has control over them to some degree. I don't know how that
Yeah,
would
I
work,
mean
but
the I think a common misconception is that MLB is the one instituting blackouts. No, it's
mm,
something the RSNs insist upon because that's how you get people to subscribe and to cable packages, and that's how they get carriage fees and all that. Uh, Now there is a possibility that the agreements will continue, but they will be restructured. In which case, maybe there's some headway they can make in terms of blackouts.
yeah,
MLB wants them to go away. The teams want them to go away. We've heard the DeWitts, saying that they want them to go away. They will eventually. And I think, in some ways, I think MLB is probably disappointed by Amazon's entry into this because it
yeah,
has the potential to save Diamond and keep the status quo, which extends to blackouts. So, maybe MLB ultimately gets its way on this and we get a restructuring. And that would presumably lead to no blackouts, which would be good news for you, especially.
yeah. It's one of the reasons I am following this as much as I am reading
Yeah.
everything I can on this because, again, I would like to, not have to. Well, even when I was watching Jump Through Hoops, I had to buy the DirecTV, then you had to buy the extra package to get the Cardinals here, because otherwise
Yeah.
I'm watching Houston, and who wants to do that? So,
Right. Right.
that kind of stuff. So, just to be able to, I think ideally MLB would like if you could turn on MLB TV, you'd probably have
Yeah.
to double the price of what it is, but still turn
Right.
on MLB TV and watch whatever game you wanted to watch.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. It's amazing that that's such an impossibility.
yeah,
Something
yeah,
theoretically so simple. And the last credible blackout map I could find, I think, was 2019. And the
mhm,
Cardinals' blackout territory included all or parts of 10 states. And this
yeah,
is, I guess, the hazards of having this sort of national
mhm,
brand, if you will, and that
yeah,
this is just every swath of the Midwest, even to the upper Southwest, into the Memphis area, and all over. Uh, you got Cardinals territory, and that's reflected by the blackout policies. So I think, in terms of getting those subscriptions in a direct consumer world in which there would be no blackouts, I think the Cardinals could do pretty well.
yeah. So basically, it sounds like you're saying this is all KMOX's fault for spreading the gospel of Cardinal baseball in the 40s and 50s, and then making it the national
Well,
game. So,
I have my origins as a fan to thank for KMOX because that's what made my
mhm.
dad a fan, and of course pass it on to me because we were nowhere near St. Louis, we were in Mississippi and
Oh yeah.
Alabama, so yeah, but yeah, it's if I could go back in time, I would torn that transmitter down. Yeah.
Well, maybe we could just go back enough to figure out blackouts, but no, not
Yeah,
not, not get too extreme.
maybe that's the best.
Maybe we'll do that instead. So,
Yeah.
as part of your, especially as far as your national work, do you ever get down to spring training?
Not in a long time. I was in Arizona several years ago. I've done playoffs recently, an All Star game, but not spring training in several years. But I would love to. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So,
no,
so you're
hasn't
like
really been
the
on the agenda.
yeah, you're like the rest of us, getting it all from Derek Gould and Katie Wu and all those kind
Right,
of people as
right,
they
right. Yeah, yeah,
shoot video from
yeah.
15 feet away and all that kind of stuff. So,
Right, right, right.
uh,
Yeah.
but it's exciting, and I mean, it's really kind of surprising because we know how the connection of Bill DeWitt to Rob Manfred,
Hmm.
why he allowed this balanced schedule thing, because you think he'd want to stay like, no, we want to play the Central, like, we don't want to
Yeah.
play anybody else,
Right.
we just want to play the Central.
Right.
Can we arrange
Right.
that?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
that would be so much. I mean, especially this year when you look at I mean, who do you think is the most competition for the Cardinals as it stands right now? And of course, there's free agents still out there. They may be out there till June,
Yeah.
but as it stands right now, who do you think is the biggest competition for the Cardinals?
I think it's the Cubs. Only in part because I also expect them to do something else. I expect Bellinger's
Mhm.
going to wind up there or something of that scale. But yeah, I mean, they just they kind of underplayed their fundamentals last season. I think they had a stronger roster than it seemed, and their infield defense is exceptional, and they have some interesting arms. And I think they're the biggest competition right now. I think the Brewers, they just lost too many starting pitchers from last season. I think to for me to take them too seriously,
Yeah.
and that's not a strong offense either. So the Brewers, I just don't see it, and the Reds, I'm kind of low man on the Reds. I know they're kind of a popular pick, dark horse kind of because the sort of season they had to build off of last season, but I just don't see it looking up and down that roster. I think the infield's too crowded. I think the rotation is totally suspect, and I'm low man on the Reds right now.
There's definitely, I agree. The Reds are going to have the same issue that the Cardinals had last year of trying to figure out where they're going to play everybody, and then they go and
Yeah,
sign Jonathan India to a 2-year deal
and the
today.
Candelario kind,
Yeah.
I don't, yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I will say, if Hunter Green takes that next step, and
yeah,
if some of their young pitchers stay healthy, I mean, you're playing in a ballpark that's not great for them, but they
right,
can be intriguing, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah. And then there's Pittsburgh, which I don't.
yeah.
I don't know that we could just. I mean, again, Pittsburgh finally to ruined Alex Cristofuli's nice little streak of the Cardinals always finishing ahead
They did.
of the
I know. I
Pirates.
thought about that. Came up
Uh,
on our last appearance. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So, so I don't. Maybe we shouldn't just kind of dismiss them out of hand, but
yeah,
they're still trying to do something. I just don't know exactly what.
yeah. They just they have some interesting players. Brian Hayes, particularly, he may be
Hmm.
the best defensive third baseman in baseball right now.
Right.
But I just some of their younger guys have just not taken that step. O'Neill Cruz has missed, I think almost all of the last 2 seasons now, and just and
Yeah.
quietly getting up there in years as young players go. So yeah, I they just seem like a 80 win ceiling to me looking at them, and
Mhm.
but it's all things are possible in the Central Division, so we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, 80 wins is not that far off from winning this division,
Right,
unfortunately.
right,
So,
right, right.
you
It's
know,
just what I think about when people talk about, oh, you need to do it like the NBA and just give berths to the top teams and don't worry about the
mhm.
divisions. So it's like, no, you don't want to do that to the Rust Belt teams. You need them fighting out with each other. Otherwise, you're never going to see a Cleveland in the playoffs and all that. So yeah,
Well,
no,
and
let's
to
let's keep these
me,
centrals.
yes, we definitely. Although, I mean, I guess you'd make the argument that maybe that would inspire some people to do some things if you knew you had to,
Right,
be in the
that's
top six
possible.
versus winning the division. But I don't
That's
know.
possible.
I don't think anything that that the clubs have ever done that is supposed to motivate them has done that. We didn't see anybody. I don't think the top 2 seed thing got people, spending to
Right,
try to get to that spot, did that?
right, yeah.
They're
So
still like,
who
well,
knows?
we get in, we'll do it. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's, and I feel like because I'm an old fuddy duddy, um, we've gotten a long way away from the flavor of the National League and American League, right?
Oh
It's
yeah,
MLB now,
yeah,
right? It's just
yeah.
this
Right.
homogenous stuff, and that's the balance schedule and interleague play and all that kind of stuff. And I guess there's good things and bad things about it. I can give you the list of the bad things, um,
Yeah.
to do that and go. I mean, because we even talk about oh, there's been even that idea of just take the top 12 of everybody, right? Maybe it's
Yeah.
10 national,
Yeah.
maybe 10 American League
Yeah.
teams, and I just feel like you're losing because one of the great things about baseball is that history and the comparisons and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And the more you do of that, the more you lose.
I think the game started going downhill when we had all-star uniforms instead of players wearing their team uniforms at the all-star game.
I
That
tell
was
you, preach on. I mean,
yeah.
because that is I cannot believe that. I mean, again, I'm an old fuddy duddy, but I mean that was one of
Yeah.
the greatest things, right? As you see,
Yes.
all those different uniforms out there, and
Yes.
they had it,
So great.
and they had the All Star uniforms for the home run derby, and that was cool, and
They took
but
team pictures with all those different
yeah,
uniforms, and yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
It's,
mean, and that,
yeah, yeah. And I also miss the exotic nature of the World Series, like two unimaginable teams playing each other.
mhm.
Who could
Yeah,
imagine the Yankees playing the Dodgers and the Cardinals playing the Brewers, and that sort of thing. So
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
miss that. So
yeah.
uh,
And now it's
you know,
like, okay, how did they
yeah,
do this year? Because we've seen them, so we've seen this
right,
matchup. So,
right, yeah,
um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
anyway, if you get me getting on the old man rant, I will be here
Yeah,
forever. So let's
I'll ride that train too. Yeah, yeah. We're losing listeners as we speak. Yeah.
I just hope they've made it this far. That's all so we'll see. So, but anyway, well, Dane, I have kept you an hour or so, and I don't want to keep you any longer, but I appreciate you joining me tonight. And again, great work at it's birdywork.substack.com if you haven't gone. And I know Dane's got a few free pieces. Read those. You'll want to subscribe. So it's not, you know, it's not RSN money to subscribe. So you're all right.
No blackouts either.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be bad. Yeah. Oh, sorry. You're in Iowa. You can't read this.
Yeah.
So.
That would be a questionable business policy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, given how
Yeah.
many podcasts start in Iowa, Cardinal podcasts are in Iowa, I think that would be a really bad thing. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
anyway,
Yeah.
but
Well, I
Dane will
really
do it
appreciate you
again.
having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
Uh,
Enjoyed it.
I
Always.
I appreciate it. Next week we'll have Jason Hill from Viva Alberto's joining us. But until next time, for Dane, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Widespread stance, arms out over the plate. Bickford from the stretch. The 1-1 pitch. A swing, and there it goes! Left field, way back! That's home run number 700! Pujols hits a 3-run homer, and he hit 699 and 700 at Dodger Stadium on September 23rd, 2022.